All right, it is 1 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started with our expert panel. Sara, I see you're on the call, but if you put there you go. And hopefully all the panelists with their cameras on, and once they start talking, we'll get to the top of the screen for everyone. And I will let Dr. Kim take it away for us, who's going to be leading our panel today.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. First, I'm Dr. Kimberlee Wyche-Etheridge, and it is my pleasure to have the opportunity to moderate this, this panel. I hope you all have been enjoying the cross-pollination and conversation that's been going on throughout the meeting. It has been so amazingly invigorating to share it with all of y'all. And this is going to be a opportunity to continue the conversation just in a little bit more of a structured way. So with that, just a couple of comments about the panel as we move forward. One is that unfortunately we have a limited amount of time, and I want to make sure that we get through as many of the questions and give everybody the opportunity to speak, which means that we're going to have to cut you off possibly if you keep talking. So I'll do it nicely, but I do ask that you are respectful of the time so that everyone has the opportunity to speak and we can get as much information out as possible. And that does mean that as a possible, we might not get to all of the questions or everybody's comments. And if that is the case, we'll make sure that whatever questions still remain are answered and everyone has access to that information. I'm going to take an opportunity to formally introduce all of the speakers so that you know who is going to be on the panel, and then we'll start going through some of the questions. So I'm going to start, and as you see, the speakers will be have their cameras on so that you can identify the face with their short little bios. So first I'd like to introduce Ms. Stacy Clark, who works with the Sickle Cell Foundation of Tennessee and has been a community expert in 6 community engagement studios at Vanderbilt since 2014. And these studios has helped inform patient engagement focusing on sickle cell care, identifying needed mammography services for women, informing messaging and material, as well as recruitment for COVID-19 clinical trials, and more. Many of these studios have focused on ways to increase research participation from traditionally underrepresented and underserved communities. And Stacy feels that participating in these studios allows researchers the opportunity to better understand these communities. Okay. Next, Ms. Patricia Hall. And Ms. Hall has participated as a community expert in 2 community engagement studios at the University of Michigan over the past 6 months. Ms. Hall has been a community expert in 3 community engagement studios, providing feedback on topics such as community engagement through precision medicine, improving health outcomes from traumatic brain injuries, and more. And much of the focus of these studies has been on increasing recruitment and retention. Through her participation in these studios, Patricia feels she has a voice in how studies are performed and that she is being heard. And our third community member is Ms. Fahina Tavake-Pasi, who is the executive director of the National Tongan American Society in Salt Lake City, Utah. And Fahina has been a community expert in 9 community engagement studios, providing feedback on topics such as women's health, support for Alzheimer's caregivers, emergency dispatch services, diabetes prevention programs, data sharing, and consent, mental health, and of course, COVID-19. Through her participation in studios, she has seen the importance of including community voices in research about that community and the need for organizations to build that bridge between researchers and the community, and the importance of reporting research findings back to the community. We also have 3 researchers on the panel. The first is Dr. Derek Griffith, who is a professor and director of the Center for Men's Health Research at Vanderbilt University, at least until the summer, at which point he will be transitioning to Georgetown University as co-director of the Racial Justice Institute. He studies why health varies by race, ethnicity, and gender, and what can be done to give people equal opportunities to be healthy. Dr. Griffith has led 5 community engagement studios since 2015, and the research projects have centered around African-American men's health And the studios have had a focus on messaging, community outreach, recruitment and retention, and dissemination. Dr. Sara Simonsen is an associate professor in women's and reproductive health at the University of Utah. Her research has focused on motivating women to participate in diabetes prevention, approaches to help women think about the impact of their health before and in between pregnancies, and on pregnancy outcomes, and the impact of obesity during the reproductive years as it relates to infertility. Dr. Simonsen has held 7 community engagement studios for 3 research projects with a focus on women's health. And finally, Ms. Rachel Dawson, who serves as the Managing Director of Precision Health at the University of Michigan. She works with faculty co-directors to shape strategy, implement programs, and develop resources for researchers across campus. Precision health facilities research, across disciplines and in a variety of topics from cancer to mental health to metabolic diseases and more. Precision Health at the University of Michigan has conducted 4 community engagement studios with a focus on engaging communities as partners, use of de-identified health data for research, and with messaging. So with these esteemed guests, the information that's going to come and the knowledge and experience with studios will be priceless. And again, we're going to try to get through as many questions. So we'll spend about 7 minutes or so on each question. And as we move forward, the first question, if you could describe your experience with studios and the impact they have had for you. And I'm going to open that up to the panelists to see if I get a bite. Otherwise, I'm going to call on someone.
I'll bite.
Thank
so
you.
Describe my experience with studios and the impact on me. Precision Health, the reason why we decided to do these studios, standing advisory committees are a great approach to getting information and engaging your community, but you have a static set of people that you always hear from. And we don't necessarily feel that that is great representation of the large community that we serve. And because of the nature of what we do, we needed to hear from more of our participants to get their feedback and to really appreciate the trends across, were there trends across types of participants or hearing from individuals. And so our experience with the studios is that it's allowed us to reach more people. We've heard different perspectives, and it's really helped us understand how the participants in our studies like to be communicated with. And so they've really enhanced communication, but also from a researcher perspective, opened our eyes to some of those stereotypes. You know, we look at research, we form beliefs based on that research. And then I think it impacts how we approach the community. So these studios have really changed how we think of our participants, how we approach our participants, and has set us from a mindset of these are people that we are merely serving, but the people we're partnering with to improve health. And so the impact on me is just really the phenomenal ability to see our researchers. And I know COVID has been a problem, but one benefit of COVID for us, especially in Michigan, that's a fairly large state as far as landmass. Through these studios, you know, we sit at the southeast corner of the state and we have a huge upper peninsula, and it's even allowed us to have people from that part of our state give us feedback via Zoom in these studios. So I just think they've been great.
Wonderful.
This is Fahina from Salt Lake City. I participated on several studios, and I think the impact of it on me is the fact that it's basically, I appreciate the fact that researchers are including the voices of community members, most especially if the research is done on community members. I feel that it's very important that their voices are heard and are part of that. So, and my experiences with the studios, they've been very, especially at the University of Utah, they have been very effective in gathering. What they've done is they've reached out to community members or organizations in the community that are well known within the communities. You know, there's just not any Tom, Dick, or Harry but they're really identifying community members that are working in the communities and have the trust of community members to represent the voice of the communities. And like I said, I think with that, it's very important that that issues about the communities that those communities participate.
You can hear some of the commonalities with the themes of just the symbiosis that goes along between the researchers and the community members. Others like to add in their thoughts about the experience with studios and the impact that they've had for you personally.
This is Sara Simonsen. I would like to add from the perspective of a researcher. I'm always really humbled and reminded of that bidirectional, the importance of that bidirectional process, because we often come as researchers with questions we want answered. And I love that community members say, you've got to give back to us. We need this. Like, it's not just how can we help you, but there's always this reminder. I think that it's got to be a partnership, and that there's more work than you would traditionally think of in doing a research study, really important work in terms of working with that community. And I've really appreciated how participants have been real open about that.
Wonderful.
I'm not a researcher. I'm a person that people ask what I think. And when I first got the email, I was very enthusiastic, because the running joke in my community is that nobody ever asked us. You know, it's like we'll see a study up and it'll be like, really? You know, is that how you feel? And we'll just kind of laugh at it. And I thought it was very important to get the voices of the community. And I was really proud of U of M for contacting me, and I'm very enthusiastic about it. Just one more thing, and that's that when you do research, or when I do research, one of the things I have to be aware of is that I may come across some things that are not in my thesis. I may come across some information that I was not looking for, but that is very important to the research that I'm doing, and makes a big difference. So I'm really glad that I was asked to be a part, and I'm glad for all of the people when we met in Michigan. Hearing their voices really made a difference, and to know that they were being listened to.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to move on to the second question. And the question is, how have studios informed your research or your perspective on research? And I'm going to ask Ms. Clark to start.
It changed my perspective on research, because I honestly didn't know that so much went into it. I thought that maybe, you put up a flyer, ask for people to come, you call, and you get people, and you didn't really care what kind of people. You just, it has to fit this, you need to have this, and that. And I think with going to the studios, it helped see where the researchers were like, okay, how do we get this group of people? We want this group of people and more of this group of people, mainly speaking of, African-American community, to come out and to do this and to do that. And that really changed my perspective on research and how they go about it and approach it. I thought, like I said, I thought they just kind of threw it out there and whoever comes, but they actually do care about the people that they get in the research projects. And they were trying to ask us what are the questions that we need to ask? And me, I come from a standpoint usually of a caregiver. I have a child who deals with a illness, a sickle cell. So I come from that perspective of what do you need to do to help, get to us, or in certain times of the day that you might need to do the research and how to offer it and things like that. So it was really eye-opening to see, the care that goes into the research projects.
Wonderful. Thank you. Dr. Griffin, you've been quiet.
I have. So I think for me, what studios have done, well, let me just say, I come from being formally trained in community-based participatory research, in community psychology. So partnering with community is not really a foreign concept to me. I also do a lot of qualitative research. So this idea fundamentally is not that necessarily foreign. However, I think what studios have done for me and our work is help us to think even more critically and clearly about how the potential participants actually respond to or think about some of the questions that we're asking. I mean, if you think about a lot of the assumptions that we make about asking essentially closed-ended questions or how they're worded, one of the things that, for example, we just found when we were doing a study on trust, and we were having discussions about, well, we put in questions about we had a lot of conversation within the research team about how should we talk about what are they supposed to trust, whether it was providers, whether it was healthcare systems, and so forth. And when we asked them about, we finally settled on healthcare organizations, and then we sort of presented it to the studio, and they were like, well, do you mean the hospital? Do you mean the health system that they're part of? Do you mean the payers? Do you mean the insurance agents? Do you mean the nurse practitioner? Like who are you talking about when you're talking about these things? And we thought we did this great job and had our little disclaimer at the beginning of who we were talking about. And they were just like, yeah, it's still not clear to us. And just to see the diversity of perspectives was really important. There's also it adds for me a lot of practical feedback that has been really helpful in shaping the work that we do.
And Ms. Dawson, I see you shaking your head there. What was resonating with you? Those pesky mute buttons.
To Derek's point about the practical feedback you get and advice that helps you make adjustments to how you're approaching research participants, how you're recruiting into your programs is very helpful. And I know I'm going to bleed over into another question, but for some of our studios, it was very important for us to reach people of color and to have that engagement with especially Black participants around research where there's so much underrepresentation, and to be ready for the honest feedback that stems from the history that people of color have experienced within medical care and medical treatment and medical research. And to realize that it's not just history, but it's presence, that they still suffer disparate care, disparate access, and to have that honest feedback. And so my advice is that if you're ready to engage, be ready for the practical feedback, but be ready for those things that may become uncomfortable for you depending on who you are, but be real and be willing to engage in those real conversations. Don't approach it as you're working on a study subject, approach it as you're working with a person with a great deal of humanity that they're bringing to the study for you, and to respect that feedback and take it no matter how hard it may be for you to hear it.
I love that comment about the past as well as part of the present. So Dr. Griffith, before I let you speak again, community, from our 3 community members, any added comments on that?
Sure, I can add a few things. I think my perspective of research as I participate in studios is that it's a great opportunity where us community members or patients are able to come together with researchers and to engage and share information with each other. And in so doing, I have found that researchers are not only appreciative, but they feel like that their information are much more relevant, much more patient-centered. They have a patient-centered approach. And especially if you're coming from a different culture, from different other cultures, that it becomes culturally relevant. And especially if their study is focusing on that. There's different culture other than American culture.
I love it. And Dr. Griffin, I'll let you have the final word on this for this question.
Well, this may not be a direct answer to the question, but the analogy that came to me as we were sort of prepping for this was we have to treat research participation and partnership recognizing essentially it's essentially a leisure time activity that we're asking our partners to participate in. We're asking them to take time out of stuff that's really important to them and use that time for stuff that's important to us and that we get paid for that they don't necessarily do either, that they don't get it's not part of their day job. This is extra time that they're taking to do this, to help us and to help others. So you're asking them to take time away from loved ones, friends, family members, and enjoyable activities to do something that may not just necessarily directly benefit them. And so it just kind of, that has always stuck with me, even just thinking about for my community partners historically, that's been something I've had to sort of wrestle with. How much do I burden them with these kind of, asks and so forth, and how to negotiate that.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like that weaving thread of really mutual respect and almost a humbleness of both parts about really being willing to listen and learn from each other. Beautiful. Okay. For our third question, if another researcher or community member asked you whether they should participate in a studio, what would you tell them and why? And I'm going to ask Ms. Hall to start this one.
I would enthusiastically recommend that they participate. The reason is because we need to have our voices heard. There are two, many, but I'll only mention two things that come to mind. The first is, of course, my sister who passed away from cancer. And we had heard about the immunotherapy and we submitted her blood cells because we got so excited about it. We found out that there was there was very little of her gene pool. And in a very nice way, they told us there were not enough Black people in that pool for them to match her DNA. And the other thing that came to mind was I'm a retired teacher, and I came across an article of the effect of racism on children, which I've taught for over 25 years, and I had never heard about that. I mean, I knew about the effects of racism in the corporate world, and when I looked at it, it was like, why am I only getting this little piece of information? I tried to find more information on it, and I couldn't. And I'm thinking that if we had more research and more community participation, maybe our researchers' minds would be opened up a little more to ask these questions. Maybe these questions would become interesting to them.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Okay. I like that. And Dr. Simonsen.
So I've enthusiastically promoted studios to a number of people in the College of Nursing where I work. On a sort of researcher career perspective, I know people have used studios to get preliminary data that have helped them get NIH funding. So it's been helpful for people in that way. I also think there's a lot of emphasis and like workshops on community engaged research, but I don't think there's a substitute for sitting in a room or on Zoom and actually hearing the voices of people around the research you want to do, whether they view it as important, what the challenges they see are. And I think for people that are new to that world, it's a real nice introduction, including what I mentioned before, that studio participants have been very honest about, we need you to come back with this information. We need more resources about this topic. That I think traditional researchers don't think about that side. It's a nice opening for them into this world.
I love researchers in the air quotes. When you did that, kind of says it takes it's a different type of researcher that embraces community studios. So I think that if you're a researcher, that's a positive thing. Others on this idea of how would you respond if somebody asked you about participating in a studio?
I would definitely tell them to participate. I think one of the main things that I have actually enjoyed is meeting all kinds of different people and all different, ethnic groups, especially if it's like a condition that I have or someone I know has, and someone else has, and it's to actually sit there and hear their stories about things that went on in their lives with their person or with them. So it's I guess almost like a little, for us, I guess not the researchers, almost like a little support group, and you get to learn things and you find people and interacting and just it's a great way of discussing different conditions or things like that maybe some people you don't get to talk to about it, and meet different people and meet new people and learn from different cultures and different lifestyles, things like that. There was one that we did, and there was a transgender gentleman, and he told me, he's like, you can ask me whatever. I was like, great. It's like I have questions, and it was just great that I was able to speak to him, and it was just things like that I've gotten to know a lot of the participants in the studios and have become really good friends with them.
That concept of the support group, I think, is key. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to just to add that, I would definitely agree with what everybody else would say, have shared. I mean, and then it's important for me, when I ask people to participate, that it's important to let them know that their input really will help the researcher better design and implement their research, and most especially if it's regarding to their community. But lastly, I would also recommend to them that if they are going to participate in such, that they also require the researchers to report back to them or share with them what that final thing is. If they're going to share their information, that they too, researchers would need to report back to them on the outcome of what they've done.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Can I add one quick point? I have been.
Let me think about that. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
I have been so impressed with the ability of the University of Utah to pull together studios on really specific groups. I think you guys have talked about this throughout the day, but we're working on one right now for rural women that have experienced depression during pregnancy or after pregnancy, which is such a narrow group. We've done one on brown and Black people who have high blood pressure and or short sleep, and they've been able to find people that really understand the topic we're working on.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any last comments on that?
Yeah, the only quick thing I'll add is only do it if you're actually open to the feedback.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not, then don't. I don't want to be tacky and impolite, but don't waste people's time if you're not really serious about really taking into account and absorbing and integrating the feedback. Make sure that you have enough time to actually do it, and you're not just checking off a box, that you do it early enough in the study design and the application process to be able to incorporate the feedback in a very substantive, thoughtful way.
Wonderful. Respecting people's time is all.
I just wanted to say that for the brain injury panel that I sat on, I was very impressed with the researcher, or with the doctor, how patient he was when he answered all of our questions in a way that we can understand, and how he really seemed to pay, to want to know what we thought and to take it into consideration in his research. And I was impressed with that. And I felt that it meant something, me being there, because when they first said brain injury, I'm like, I don't know anything about brain injuries, but his explanations, his questions, and his answers were very, they gave me a sense that he really, really wanted to know. He was not wasting my time. And I also agree that I'm invested in these panels, and I would like to know the end result. I would like to know the end of the research, what happens, what their final results were.
That need for the feedback to make sure that the information gets back to the community. I think that's a key point. And Ms. Hall, since you were the last one speaking, I'm going to have you respond to the next question first. And that is, how do or can studios impact the community, particularly efforts to eliminate racial and ethnic disparities in health and healthcare outcomes?
I would say the main thing is to listen. and not just listen with a preconceived notion of what you want to hear, but listen for what you had not thought about. I think it's very important for for my community to feel that they're being listened to. I've sat on a number of tables, at a number of tables for my voice, but no one has heard what I said. And I get the feeling that I was there just to fulfill, somebody's, like you say, check off a box, to fulfill somebody's requirement. And so I would urge that you listen. The feedback would be great, that we know we're being listened to, and the way that you answer the questions, I think is very important. I think this whole idea of asking the community is wonderful, but don't let it stop there. Please don't let it stop there. Please let it actually make a difference.
Wonderful. And Ms. Dawson, pick that up, Dr. Dawson, can you pick up on right there? I saw that head shake, so I've learned to know that you got something that you're going to add to that. So.
I think the very important point to make is that the studio may be the launch of a conversation. It should not be the stop of the engagement with your participants. And especially for me in the area of diversity, when you're trying to build a relationship with community of color, don't just be the person that's sucking information out of them, but then not providing service and being responsive to the feedback. One thing our participants in Michigan, Ms. Hall and her counterparts they're very honest about, especially the University of Michigan. We're a very large, very elite institution, and a lot of people of color are hesitant to use our services, even though we're one of the top health systems in the country, because of experience with in the past, because of a perceived issue and a very real issue of how we communicate with our patients or treat the community. And so don't just set up these studios to communicate. Make sure you're going to have resources to follow up, to truly engage, to truly relationship build, and to truly serve the community in which you sit. And be very conscientious in your efforts in doing that.
Wonderful, thank you. Dr. Griffin.
I think from the researcher side, one of the questions that often this kind of conversation brings up is, so how do we disseminate that information back to the community? The great thing is a studio can help you figure that out. So you don't have to figure out all these questions that we come up with. Well, how do we do this? How do we do that? We don't have to actually figure it out by ourselves. You can actually use this tool to get that information about what are the best ways to disseminate the information back to the community. What are the vehicles through which it's going to be most received, most heard, most widely disseminated. Those are things that we really need to, that's why you do these kinds of tools. This is why you engage people, is to really know how to meet them where they are. And so I think just those very basics are really important.
You think you muted yourself at the end of that sentence.
Oh, I was just saying that those are the kinds of things, some of those very basic pragmatic things are, are just some of the tools that you can use to ways you can use studios.
Wonderful, thank you, thank you. Others? I'm looking at Ms. Tavake-Pasi. You can't tell that I'm looking at you.
Well, personally, I think that if if we're in the process of wanting to eliminate racial, ethnic disparities and health disparities, all that kind of stuff, we need to get to the root of it, and we need to identify the root of those disparities. And identifying the roots of those disparities can only come from the source. And so studios is very impactful, because they serve as voices for the community when you're recruiting the people from the community. So personally, I think the way we work those studios and recruit the folks, we can actually get some really good outcomes on how to address our health disparities within our ethnic communities.
Wonderful, great point. From the source, getting the information from the source. Ms. Hall.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add a point. to Ms. Dawson's point, I'm a cancer survivor, and someone had recommended U of M as a hospital for me to go to. And I agreed with that person that U of M is an excellent, excellent hospital. But what I said was they can have the best care in the world, but if I don't receive it, it means nothing to me. And that was my hesitancy in going and switching over to U of M, was because we all know that it's a great hospital, but we don't know that it responds to people of color. We don't know that people of color will go there and get that great care. And so that's why I was doubly really, really happy to participate in the community engagement. When I saw I had heard from my doctor and from other people at U of M that they were working on it, but when I saw the email, I was very, very pleased. It's like, okay, they're serious. They really want to do this thing. But there is a meme, there's lore going on in the community that once you have been identified as a racist organization, that spreads, as bad news spreads fast, that spreads throughout the community. And Ms. Dawson is going to have a big job in countering that information, because word of mouth, you trust your neighbors, you trust your friends. So good luck.
Good point.
I'll help.
Uh-huh. So you got some help there. Dr. Simonsen.
One thing that I think has been interesting is that as researchers, we often come with a topic, how to improve sleep, or, something very specific and often very medical. And I've found that these studios and other approaches where you really engage the community help you understand these other factors, social determinants, discrimination, and how they underlie this problem. So honestly, you can't really address the problem from your biomedical perspective without understanding all of these other issues, and the voices of the community bring that in and help us think about that and how to address that to be more effective in improving the health outcome that we're seeing.
Mm-hmm. Changing perspectives has to start somewhere, and it's kind of one step at a time. So very good points. The last formal question, because I've seen questions coming up in the chat, and that's kind of my side view there, is beyond activities like this summit, how can the studio model be marketed to institutions and other researchers? And I'll ask Ms. Clark to start.
To market it, I guess I would think that for my group, it would be more like something to market, to maybe show or demonstrate or give an example. Because honestly, at first, when I said that I would do a studio, I thought that I was doing a research study. I didn't realize that the studio was meant to get everything together for the research study and things like that. So I don't think a lot of people understand, just like non-research or non-people that aren't in the medical field or things like that, understand what the studio is really all about. And maybe doing a short little demonstration or something on YouTube or TikTok, because that's kind of where my little generation lives. Or something like that, like a skit or something to show what it is. Maybe that would help with the marketing, because honestly, I wouldn't have just you saying it and maybe just, giving a little spill about it really doesn't show you kind of what it is. It's more visual, I think, would help out. But that's just from my take of a non-medical person here.
TikTok. Okay, I'm writing that down.
You go down that TikTok rabbit hole, you're there for like 4 hours. It's a world of knowledge.
It's a world of something.
It is.
Others. Beyond the studio, beyond the summit, how can the studio model be marketed?
Well, I hate to say research is going to help, promote this kind of tool to help do research, but I think actually studying how and why it is effective, I guess technically if it's effective, by actually being able to document, and compare studies that have used this tool to inform the studies and to, inform how they've actually done, both qualitatively and quantitatively, how they're compared to those that have not. I think there's some, it wouldn't to me just be which one got funded and so forth, but I think more of the qualitative for me would be more meaningful because it's going to get at some of the information that the researchers can, I think being able to do this and actually being able to document this is going to be really important. But getting that information out, giving it to researchers who are trying to write proposals. We come at this from a very pragmatic standpoint. We're trying to get funded and we're trying to build research careers and keep jobs. So, this is, if this is going to help us do that, then we're going to be all for it, or at least the smart ones will. So
it's got some of the personal benefits also. Nice. Okay. Dr. Simons.
If you can emphasize the impact of the research. So is there some sustainability of what you've studied or interventions in the community that you would see more with this model? And even satisfaction of participants, your ability to really recruit diverse participants. And then I think what a lot of researchers want is to have one study build to the next study so you can move the science along. So how could you demonstrate that this model really facilitates not just one study done well, but progression of research to really help community?
Nice. Others? See if you can tell if I'm looking at you. Ms. Hall, anything to add there? Ms. Dawson?
I was just going to say that I think
I felt that you had something to say there.
all of those suggestions have been really, really excellent. And I would say participating in one, I think, you learn from experience, and just having, maybe have someone come in and experience an actual studio to see what goes on, to give them a good idea of what's happening there. And again, letting the feedback from the study, once the study is done, this study is different from another study because of community engagement.
So it sets it apart.
Right.
Excellent. Any last thoughts or comments on the marketing of the studios? Ms. Dawson, I can just read your face. What do you want to add there? It's going to explode.
I think my situation is a bit unique because I'm always recruiting so that there's a wealth of information for researchers across our campus through our Michigan Genomics Initiative. Even though we're a Michigan Medicine Initiative, we make the research and the electronic health records and the genetic records of these patients available to all researchers at the University of Michigan. And so in promoting studios, I'm able to say to researchers, MGI has the unique ability to recontact our patients for additional information, but as part of that package, the unique ability to tell them, and we're also able to get them in a room or on a Zoom for you so you can have direct communications that will help you address potential biases in your research or how you're promoting your research or how you're communicating about your research. So it's an added benefit and service that we provide to our campus through this very important resource of the Michigan Genomics Initiative. And so I'm providing you a service, researcher, and it's an effective way because they need that resource. And it's things they don't have to do on their own. They no longer have to find a way to pay for it. They no longer have to find the time to do it for themselves. It's a service that will provide them.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I wanted to make sure that we left time for questions from the chat and from the audience. But just some of the themes that I heard over the course of those 5 questions or so, the importance of launching the conversation. Okay. The fact that the studios are bi-directional, Okay, that the community has the opportunity to feel heard, all right? And then the opportunity for feedback, as well as meeting people where they are. And the last one is from the source. So just some of the themes that I noted down during that. And I wanted to open it up to questions and for the I'll call it the chat trolls, those who've been monitoring the chat. Can you let us know some of the questions that have been raised that we can pose to the panelists?
Sure, Dr. Kim. The first one we have is for Dr. Griffith. The question is, how have you used studios within the CBPR research, looking for pros and cons of using this model versus other community engagement methods, such as advisory boards or including community members as part of your study team?
So to start with the point that one of my community partners from Flint used to say all the time, I think for me, it's a both and, not an either or. Each of those approaches offers something very different to the conversation. And by having a community partner, basically work alongside you to develop, a study and really a program of research from the beginning is a very different thing than having an advisory board kind of speak to some specifics of particular studies. And then this tool of community engagement studios for me is more akin to my qualitative hat, I would say member checking, where you're getting information from people to see if the way that you're approaching it and thinking about it is correct. And to get information about, again, for me, it ends up being very practical things about how do you word this? Where should I go for that? How do I reach people for this? What site should I use for that? So I think it really complements it in a way, because usually the other groups are kind of set and smaller, and they're usually folks that we go back to on a regular basis or have long-term partners. But this gives you sort of a fresh look at the community and from a very different perspective.
Thank you. And Colleen, next question.
So I've got one other question here. So while I'm asking it, everyone who's been so attentive, please feel free to chat additional ones. I think we touched on this a little bit with some of the earlier questions, but to the community experts specifically, how should we, I guess from the research community, be messaging studios to people who have no experience with research or that may think negatively about research?
Ms. Hall.
I would approach it as a conversation. I would market it. I would approach it as saying, we would like to have a conversation with you about this research that we're doing. Emphasis on conversation because it's an exchange of ideas. I'll leave it there.
I would also like to, I think it's really important that researchers, if they identify like people in the community that are trusted by that community that they're trying to reach, if they could partner up with some of those people and have them help recruit some of the people for their studio. That always, trust is a very important issue in the community. So if they trust the people that are coming to them, I think they would have researchers would have an easier time of recruiting.
So in some communities, that's called the gatekeeper. So finding and meeting that community gatekeeper. And if they're on board, then you may be able to bring others, or they may be able to bring others with them. Ms. Clark, you look like I saw a little spark in your eye, like you had something to add there.
No, that's definitely one of the ways I would say, because especially in the African-American community, because of history, we do not trust a lot of research studies and things like that. And if you do have someone like my mom's the one that reached out to me and told me about this and things like that. So I know if she's okay with it, then I'm okay with doing it and participating. So it's just one of those things, definitely, is you have to have someone that you know and trust, or someone in the community that says, okay, this is what we're doing. It's kind of like, even with right now, I see a lot of pastors are doing question and answers for the vaccine. And that's mainly, because a lot of people might not trust anyone but their pastor. And if they're giving these questions and these answers, they might feel a little bit more comfortable getting the vaccine or things like that. So I think that's definitely the gatekeeper technique, yes.
Mhm. Wonderful. So gatekeepers being some of our faith-based organizations that can help with that. Mhm. Thank you.
Also, I just want to throw in, I think sometimes for researchers, sometimes it would be really great if they, and it's kind of like a win-win kind of a situation here, if they have students within that community that are at the university, to kind of partner up with some of the students from those community, and the students can help to also recruit people from their community. And not only, will the researcher get what they need, but that will kind of help, the student build his whatever his experience.
Definitely. Again, making it bi-directional, okay, and as symbiotic. All right.
If I could just add just my own little caveat to that is it's very easy for researchers as we become more established to become more separate from the community. So my only hesitation is, yes, you can send students out to do different things. You can send them out to be part of teams and so forth, but they also need to see you. If you're the PI, if you're the lead, your face matters and you need to be out there. No, I know you don't have time to again, be out there all the time, but you do need to be able to be seen, be visible, for people to be able to see, touch, and talk. Well, not touch you during COVID, but at least see you as a real person and hear from you directly, as opposed to it just being always filtered through a team of other people.
Wonderful.
I just want to add to that point. One of my PIs, I belong to the largest Black church in Ann Arbor. So a lot of times when they're doing community outreach in Ann Arbor, it's with my church. And one of my PIs who had reached out to us to do a thing, he actually came to church one Sunday, unannounced, unexpected. He communed with the people, he worshiped with the people, and everyone commented about how much they appreciated that because they felt a sincerity and his efforts and what he was doing. And he's an Indian man, he's Hindu, but he came and he was comfortable and he enjoyed himself and they really enjoyed him. So to Derek's point, they need to see you and they need to feel you too. Be real, be authentic, meet them where they are.
Wonderful. Authentic and meet them where they are. Other questions? We have a couple more minutes before the session ends.
So I'll jump in with a question of my own. We've spent the last day and a half and this panel talking about all the really great things about community engagement studios, but sometimes the most interesting thing is to find out when it's not the right solution. So can researchers and the community members maybe talk about a time where maybe a community engagement studio is not a good fit or shouldn't be used as your method of engagement on a project?
Dr. Griffith.
Again, my first answer is kind of similar to what I said before, is if you do it so late in the process that you're really just trying to check a box, it's going to be frustrating to you to have information that you can't bring into the study. And it's going to be frustrating for those who took their time to participate to hear that it didn't make it in there. So I think you have to do it early enough in the process and early enough time that you can actually incorporate the feedback. I think that for me is key.
I think it's kind of touching back on what Ms. Hall said earlier, that if you're just going to have a studio just to have a studio, but not really listen to the voice of those who you've recruited to come, I think that's a time not to have a studio if you're really not going to listen to the input.
It gets back to what was said earlier about don't waste time. Don't waste the participants' time if you're not serious about utilizing the information that you have been granted. Good points. Okay. One last question from I call it the Brady Bunch squares, but from the audience. Okay. One last question. Going once. Going twice. Excellent. Well, to our panelists, I thank you for your input, for your feedback and your thought. And that's both for the community and our researchers. I hope that this information will be particularly helpful following the examples of the studios and the feedback and the conversations we've had over the last day and a half. And I think that I have actually granted 5 minutes. So to the program people, note that I granted 5 minutes extra at the end of the session. So thank you all, and I'll turn it back over.
Thanks, Dr. Kim. You're the best for giving us 5 minutes and in general. Alicia, do you want to take over from here?
What we're going to do next, we do have extra 5 minutes. So if folks want to stretch, take a bio break, and we're also going to come back then in 5 minutes, right at 2 o'clock Central, to launch a poll. And then we will be going into the last breakout rooms of the day, and these are of your choice. So thank you to our panelists. You saw their interesting profiles in the red carpet, and now you get to know them even more. And it looks like Kyra would like to meet Dr. Griffith. So there are some chats already asking for some connections outside of the summit. And we appreciate everyone's candor and being with us today. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Kim.
My pleasure.